Hello, I'm David Janes. I had a chance to meet many of you during the Congress in January, and I'd like to follow up with several of the talks you've just heard by Dan and Tomas about innovation. In particular, I'm going to think about a more ground-level approach to transformative leadership. I want to really talk about three things. I want to talk about bottom-up innovation, really the concept of how one might get many innovators across campus involved in a program. I want to answer a question about how many people at Purdue are involved in innovation projects or as innovation managers, many times simultaneously, to give you a representative example. And I want to reflect again on the 4 R's that I talked about during the Congress in January to put those in perspective. So you've heard from both Dan and Tomas about several projects at large scale, things like our Discovery Park program, things about the Rolls-Royce partnership and strategic level university partners. And I think both Dan and Tomas did a nice job of explaining how those things don't just start at the high level. They don't start with a vice rector or a dean. They really start with individual professors doing individual research programs, and they become university level projects because of critical masses that are developed there. So I really want to focus today on this bottom-up idea. The innovator being a professor, an instructor, a staff member, or small groups of these who oftentimes define, implement, and even manage a program. In many cases at Purdue and at major US research universities, the innovator is also the manager, sometimes officially, sometimes informally. We have administrators, but they largely become facilitators to help provide resources, help interface with the external world, and to help perhaps facilitate large team efforts. And ideally, the innovator and the administrator work together to identify gaps and identify external needs, interface with major external stakeholders, and to identify alignment with the institutional plans and goals. So we talked a little bit in January about the typical roles of a professor. I showed this sample business card, or this representative business card, where we said a professor oftentimes gets involved in multiple aspects of programs. They get involved as researchers doing discovery and invention. They get involved as professors teaching, creating new courses, or doing new educational initiatives, and they get involved in engagement with our society. So if you look at the innovative activities within each of these, the professors may get involved in defining new research, publishing papers, writing new research proposals, inventing things, and in some cases even commercializing products as a separate role from their standard university role. They get involved in courses and educational programs, teaching, developing new courses, defining new curricula, new educational methodologies and approaches, such as inverted classroom. So there's lots of things they can get involved with. And new and expanded projects with society, whether it be service learning projects that help our students, or just projects and programs that help benefit, say, our government or our broader society. I wanted to make a comment here that innovation can mean a lot of things. Many times in the US system, the terms innovation is really used toward commercialization. That whole process of taking new inventions or new ideas through the process of patenting, licensing, and starting a new company, for instance, entrepreneurship. But in the scope of this program and in the scope of how one would look at the broader university roles, we're defining innovation to include all these things: research, education, and engagement with society. If you extend that idea to individuals and small groups of, say, staff, we know we have research staff that may contribute toward running laboratories or helping to conduct research projects and programs. We have courses and educational programs. Many times instructional staff will be involved in instructing courses and maybe even developing new course methodologies. And we have new and expanded activities within the society. Certainly public outreach programs or programs with local primary schools would be important to have professional staff involved. And I think one of the things that maybe the typical faculty member wouldn't get involved with would be processes and business services. Certainly we expect innovation there. Broadly, I think we also want to extend this idea to students, individual students, and teams of students. So students certainly can and should get involved in that whole research, discovery, and invention phase. Students are likely going to be our best entrepreneurs, or at least will go out and do design and industry. Courses and educational programs certainly need buy-in from the students. They need students involved to be successful. And new and expanded activities with society, oftentimes our students are our most exciting people out working in the local community. So one of the questions we were asked to define is who defines or manages innovation projects? So for research projects, the typical methodology is that Professors and research staff would identify external funding, they would define new concepts, they would write proposals, they would obtain external funding from government or companies. The principal investigator, that is the professors that are primarily involved with the program, are both officially and unofficially the project managers. They are the ones that are designated to think about appropriate expenses, authorizing appropriate expenses for the program, hiring appropriate graduate students to work on the program, and writing annual reports, et cetera, et cetera. The administration would help with providing facilities, resources, space, laboratory equipment, et cetera. But really, I would say the professors and laboratory staff are the ones, the innovators and innovation managers in this case. Based on this definition, we have about 2,000 people at Purdue that are involved at this phase. We have about 2,000 professors, all of whom are expected to do scholarly research, so it would all be project managers or program managers and innovators in this scope. We also have instructional innovation. I'll talk a little bit more about our process of creating a course in a few minutes. But professors and instructional staff generally create the new courses, revise existing courses, and are very involved in new instructional methodologies. Again, we have about 2,000 people on campus that are in this role as both innovators and managers of these projects as they go along. In the scope of commercialization, we can have professors, research staff, students that create things, design and invent new things, create patents. We have over 175 patents per year generated at Purdue now. And typically what we would do is license those patents to companies. And if a professor, a faculty or staff member creates a new company, they generally do that as a separate activity from their university role. They would take effectively a leave of absence from Purdue, or at least a partial leave of absence to do that. But certainly we anticipate that a lot of our professors and staff will do that. So the question is, why are we focusing so much on bottom-up? So there's several aspects. First of all, there's great leverage. For even with a modest amount of administration, you can have a majority of your professors and staff involved. There's ownership. If I'm a professor and I create a new course or I create a new research project, I'm likely going to take very personal responsibility for its success. I'll dedicate a lot of my time to it, even if there's limited resources available. So that ownership really means I will tend to push and drive things forward without having someone else tell me or without having someone else give me full resources. There's a creativity argument that says that if I have lots of people working on it, there'll be a diverse set of expertise, ideas, and experiences brought to the table, and we can define and create many new things that you couldn't do with more of a top-down approach. And there's a basic argument for talent. Your people will oftentimes respond to this. They're given new autonomy, they're given new authority, and in the long term will help you bring in new people that are willing and able to do these kinds of activities. So I want to talk about a couple of examples, and one of them many of you may be familiar with. We have a program at Purdue called EPICS, Engineering Projects and Community Service. This is a program that was actually started about 20 years ago. It was originally proposed by two professors. One of them was Leah Jamison, who's now our Dean of Engineering at Purdue, and many of you have likely met her during her trips to Purdue or during your visits to our campus. These two professors went to the department head and said, we have this concept for a new program. Can we get about $10,000 to start this? And so the administration didn't create this program. They just provided a little bit of seed resources to do it. The program has now evolved into a program that involves multi-semester design experiences for students. They address projects of interest for local community, for a local government organization, a local school, or a local special needs facility. And it gives us both public outreach to the community and also service learning opportunities for our students. So it satisfies a design requirement for our students as well as benefiting our community. This has now grown into a program that involves multi-departments on campus, multi-colleges, and there are branches at other universities across the country and around the world. As a matter of fact, there are program activities in Medellin related to this, and there's high school programs. So this is one that was created by two professors and has grown into a fairly substantial and very visible program. The second one I want to talk about, I think, is a little bit more generic. It happens to many faculty members on campus, but this relates to our process of actually creating a new course. So the typical process is that one or a few professors will identify the need for a new course in their technical area. They will basically write a proposal to offer this new course, including the outline and the vision for the new or modified course. This is then presented to a departmental committee, a committee of other professors in the department, who would review it based on the need for the course, the context in the curriculum, and the resources available to teach the course. It can be offered on what we call an experimental basis, a one-time offering just to prototype the course to see how it works. And this is all based essentially on just that local departmental approval. Once it's been offered at least once, it's oftentimes will be offered again. There's a review that's done, but essentially the professors that started, the professors in charge of the course, are the ones that actually monitor the course. They're the ones that collect data on the course, evaluate the course, decide and recommend what should be done next. They'll present that to the departmental committee and oftentimes be able to offer this course several times to try to get it all designed well. When it comes time to request a permanent number for this course, the approval is still very local. It involves the local department. This local departmental committee will review and make a recommendation to the department head. It will then go to the college level, our College of Engineering, for instance, and there's a fairly informal process there, but essentially it needs to be signed off by a department head and a dean upon recommendations from their professors. And if it's a graduate course, there's also a requirement from the graduate council. So this is a fairly local and very organic process, a very bottom-up process to identify and create new courses. So I wanted to speak about the way we would incentivize innovation at multiple levels. And in January at the Congress, I talked about these 4 R's of reward, release, resources, and recognition. And I wanted to reflect back on those in the context of what we just talked about in terms of having 2,000 professors or staff actually all involved in innovation and innovation management. So in terms of reward, perhaps the biggest one that we provide is promotion. If one wants to get promoted from assistant to associate professor or associate professor to full professor, it's required that every faculty member doing that has to establish a record of scholarly impact. And what we mean by that is innovations in research, education, engagement with society, and the scholarly part of it implies that it's actually published and or reviewed as one would review a peer publication. So this is required. It actually incentivizes people to do this just so they can get promoted. There's release time, and typically that would mean reduced teaching load. So professors that are actively involved in significant research programs, for instance with large amounts of external funding, would typically receive a reduced teaching load with respect to sort of our full load of teaching. And or during development of a new course, it's very common to get release time to actually focus on the development of the new course as opposed to teaching all of your traditional courses. Resources, we're fortunate in the U.S. to have a large amount of external funding available, but there are many times where we also have to have administrators who allocate internal resources to promote new activities or new programs and projects. So we certainly expect that if there's a big new innovation effort going on, that our administration will help support that. And finally, there's recognition. So at Purdue, we have lots of awards for research, education, public engagement, both at the individual and team level. And there's annual competitions for those within colleges and campus-wide. We will have award ceremonies, newsletters, etc., to celebrate people that are doing things new and innovative. Finally, I want to conclude with a slide that's actually provided by Bioentropic in Columbia. And I think this is very relevant to many of the things you've already heard from Dan and Tomas about having a foundation of individual professors, small groups working on things before you build up the larger scale programs and huge initiatives. So Bioentropic provided this as an example of how they had brought together companies and universities thinking about commercializing activities in bio-related areas. They started with small informal networks, and as those started working together and having success, they built up the larger networks and more structured networks. And I think this is very representative of the same kinds of things you've heard about today, with small groups, individuals starting to innovate. When you start trying to bring those together to higher level university initiatives or college level initiatives, to really think about where those critical masses are and where you have teams of people already working on it. So I hope this has been useful for you. Thank you very much, and I look forward to future events.